Phil Mackey, Tom Pelissero here at the Metrodome following a Vikings 24-21 victory over the Cowboys. And really, the Vikings looked sluggish in the first half. The Cowboys doubled them up in points, time of possession, and plays offensively. But the big kick return to start the second half was really the catalyst that got the Vikings over the hump today.
Yeah, that was the momentum that they needed. They needed something good to happen. This is the third straight home game where they've been booed as they left the field at halftime. They're down 14-7. Everyone knows the gravity of this game. Randy Moss gets up in front of his teammates, sounded like he laid into him at halftime, said, "You make your own energy." Well, sure enough, Percy Harvin takes back the opening kickoff in the second half. From there, even though the Vikings offense still didn't perform well, they netted 93 yards passing today. They had 188 total net yards. They didn't do a whole lot offensively. Their two touchdown drives were both short field. They both started on the Cowboys side of the 50, but they found a way to win. That's what they needed to do. They were able to finally pull through, and also you can't overlook the defense, which has kept them in a lot of games. Today, 1-1 for them.
It was a weird game because the Cowboys, instead of going deep on a depleted Vikings secondary, continuously threw dump-off passes, screen passes, and then the Vikings offensively, they didn't really take any shots down the field because the Cowboys played them two safeties over the top, rolling coverage over to make sure Randy Moss couldn't get loose. So it was almost like you were waiting for both teams to break out and go deep and take a shot, and nobody really did. And it just sort of fizzled out in the fourth quarter.
Yeah, both teams really played this game from the top down, where it's not a surprise that the Cowboys would do that because that's how teams play Randy Moss. They're always going to roll. If you're in cover two, you're always going to roll a safety over to his side. You're not going to allow Randy Moss to beat you deep. But what we saw was there were a bunch of occasions where Moss had an 8-yard cushion. They just took the 6-yard hitch. They could have done that all day. The Cowboys were doing, and it was somewhat perplexing, was they continually ran screens. Those were flat passes that were set up. They weren't just taking checkdowns.
Mm-hmm.
Those were designed plays to throw into the flats. They caught something like, I think, 15 catches between those backs combined, but really for only about a 6-yard average, you're not doing a ton of damage there. They didn't run the ball effectively. The one thing they did do that they clearly came in game planning for was they took advantage of Lito Shepherd. When he was on the football field in the nickel defense, they went after him. But let's be honest, if that's the worst you can do to the Vikings defense, attack one guy who, if anybody were healthy, would not be out there, you didn't have a whole lot going. I think the Vikings defense, all things considered, played very well in this game.
With the Vikings defense throughout the last 4 years under Leslie Frazier, the game plan has been, in a lot of cases, give those short passes over the middle. That's why tight ends tend to do well against the Vikings defense. They'll allow those little 4-yard, 5-yard passes, and they basically say, if you can string together 15 4-yard passes throughout a half, and you're going to beat us that way without making a mistake or committing penalties, go ahead and do it, and the Cowboys weren't able to do it.
And the other thing the Vikings really did to take that away and to mess up the Cowboys' game plan was when they tried to throw Jason Witten twice, E.J. Henderson picks it off.
Mm-hmm.
That happens early on in the first quarter where he's running a little in. Jared Allen comes off on a blown protection. Let's not get all, excited about Jared Allen's performance today. Yes, he hit Tony Romo twice, but neither time was he blocked. All right, let's just make that very clear right now. But E.J. Henderson takes advantage of that pass, fluttering out there. And then in the fourth quarter, E.J. is up there. They're in a zone blitz. Henderson kind of is playing the line. He's looking run, drops off, makes that play. That really, I think, discouraged them when he got him early to throw to Jason Witten. And then at the end, you make the huge play that really provided the final 3 points that they needed to win this game.
Yeah, and you mentioned earlier the Vikings, the style points matter a little bit, let's be honest. You want your team looking good as you head into the middle of the season and down the stretch. But ultimately at 1-3, both teams at 1-3, you're desperate for any kind of a victory. Wins buy you time to fix things. And now at Green Bay, at New England, 2 tough games. If you're 1-4 heading into those games, the season might be over, but you have time to fix things now. You can even afford another loss here in these next 2 games before you get into a more reasonable part of the schedule.
Now, but at the same time, they have a chance to beat up on a reeling Packers team next week. That's the other thing that plays into this. It doesn't matter for style points because no one in the NFC North is racking up style points. If anyone's Detroit, they've actually put together an offense in recent weeks, something the other teams aren't doing. The Packers are decimated by injuries right now. You lose your running back, Ryan Grant. You lose your tight end, Michael Finley. Your best pass rusher, Clay Matthews. Those are 3 huge guys to take out. Not to mention, inside linebacker Nick Barnett is out for the season. Brandon Chiller's been injured. They just had to trade today for Anthony Smith, a safety who they cut a couple of years ago because they don't have anyone else to play at safety at this point. The Packers are in really rough shape. Favre's going to be going back there. The Vikings at this point have a little bit of momentum. It's going to be a heck of a game next week. I think one way or another, it may not be the prettiest game. It may be a defensive struggle, which you wouldn't have thought about a year ago with the Packers and the Vikings. But, hey, nobody in the NFC North is lighting it up. I still think Chicago ultimately is a 500 football team. I think the Packers, with all the injuries, aren't a whole lot better than that. the Vikings may be in the same boat too. 10-6, maybe even 9-7 is enough to take this division. All the Vikings have to do is keep their heads above water, get through these next 2 games. In theory, maybe pick up a win next week against Green Bay. Then the schedule of the second half doesn't look that bad.
And how about this? With the Falcons, the Bucks, and the Bears all losing, there's no team in the NFC with 1 loss. They all have at least 2 losses. So the Vikings are just 1 game back in the loss column in the entire conference right now at 2-3.
Even more so than in past years, this early in the season, parity ruling in the NFL.
Yep, he's Tom. I'm Phil. See you next time.